Daniel almost stayed seated. That was the truth he would return to later, long after the questions, the silence, the rooms he no longer belonged to. The train was crowded, damp with the smell of wet coats and metal. Shoes squeaked against the floor as passengers shifted, tired and irritated. The doors were already closing when he noticed her, a woman standing near the entrance, one arm wrapped around a toddler, the other gripping a thin plastic grocery bag that cut into her fingers. She didn't ask. She just looked at the empty seat beside Daniel. Her eyes didn't plead. They didn't demand. They simply waited, as if prepared for either answer. Daniel felt the weight of the day settle into his legs. 12 hours at work, a meeting that went nowhere, a quiet argument waiting for him at home. He told himself, briefly, that someone else would move, someone younger, someone less tired. The doors hissed. And then he stood. Not dramatically, not for praise, just a small shift of the body, a nod. The woman murmured thank you under her breath and sat, sinking into the seat as if her bones had been holding her up out of obligation alone. Daniel took the pole instead. The train lurched forward. He did not know then that this moment, the hesitation, the choice, would follow him for the rest of his life. Daniel had ridden the 6:15 p.m. train for 7 years. Same car, same section, same seat when it was available. Routine had become a form of protection when everything else felt unstable. The city, the job market, the quiet panic of adulthood. Routine gave him something solid to lean against. He was an architect, or at least he still told himself that. He worked at a firm downtown where his name appeared in small print on large projects. He paid his rent on time. He showed up. He did what was expected of him. He liked to believe that counted for something. Rain streaked the windows, blurring the city into gray lines and reflections. Outside, traffic crawled. Inside, phones glowed. No one spoke. That's when Daniel noticed the man sitting across from him. Late 50s, well-dressed but not flashy, a sharp suit worn with familiarity, not pride. His hair was silver, neatly combed back. His eyes stayed on Daniel longer than felt polite, measuring, not staring. On his lap rested a black leather briefcase. When Daniel looked up, the man gave a slight nod. Not friendly, not hostile, just acknowledgement. Daniel looked away. The train slowed as it entered the tunnel. Not enough to alarm anyone, just enough to feel it. Then the lights flickered. Once, twice, and went out. A few passengers sighed. Someone cursed under their breath. Phone screens appeared like fireflies in the dark. Power outages happened, especially during storms. Usually the train stopped. This one didn't. It kept moving, slower now, gliding through the tunnel with a low, uncertain hum. That's when the man stood. He moved carefully, balancing as the train swayed. When he stopped in front of Daniel, he spoke quietly, his voice low enough that no one else could hear. "You didn't have to do that," he said. Daniel frowned. "Do what?" "Give up your seat." Daniel shrugged, uncomfortable. "It's fine." The man studied him for a moment. Then he nodded, as if confirming something to himself. "You'd be surprised how many people wouldn't," he said. Before Daniel could respond, the man bent slightly and placed the briefcase on the floor at Daniel's feet. "Hold this for me," he said, "just until Grand Central." Daniel's stomach tightened. I don't think—" But the man was already turning away. "Please," he added over his shoulder, "just for a moment." And then he disappeared into the next car. The train slowed again. An announcement crackled over the intercom. Static, half a word, then nothing. Daniel stared down at the briefcase. It wasn't heavy enough to look dangerous. It wasn't locked. There was no name, no tag, no obvious warning. Just worn leather, scuffed at the corners, handled often. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. The train rolled into Grand Central with a shudder. The lights flickered back on. People stood, collected bags, moved on with their lives. Daniel stayed seated. The man did not return. A knot formed in Daniel's chest. He picked up the briefcase, stood, and stepped onto the platform. He scanned the crowd. Faces blurred past him, impatient, distracted, uninterested. The man was gone. He waited. 5 minutes, 10, 20. Rain blew in through the open doors, dampening his coat. His phone buzzed, Mara asking when he'd be home. Daniel looked down at the briefcase again. This was the moment. The one he would replay later, frame by frame, asking himself where everything tipped. He told himself he was only checking for identification. He told himself it was the responsible thing to do. He unclasped the briefcase. Inside were stacks of cash. Not loose bills, bundled, thick, methodical. More money than Daniel had ever held in his life. Underneath the money was a photograph. A little girl smiling on a swing, missing one tooth. Joy unguarded. On the back, written carefully, "For my Leela, always." Daniel closed the case so fast it hurt his fingers. His mouth went dry. This wasn't abandoned property. This was someone's life. He stood there too long enough for doubt to creep in, long enough to imagine what that money could do. Rent paid, debt erased, time bought. He hated himself for the thought, and yet it came. That was the part no one ever asked him about. Not the money, not the police. That brief, ugly pause. Finally, he walked to the nearest officer and told him everything. The police did not treat him like a good man. They asked for his ID, they asked why the briefcase was opened, they asked how long he'd been holding it. They took the briefcase. They told him to come to the precinct. "You understand," one of them said flatly, "how this looks." Daniel nodded. He did understand. The investigation lasted days. They froze his accounts, pulled his phone records, interviewed his coworkers. At the firm, conversations stopped when he entered the room. On the 4th day, his boss called him in. "We need to protect the firm," he said, hands folded carefully. "This isn't personal." Daniel nodded again. He was becoming good at that. No severance, no reference. Just a quiet exit. Mara tried to be patient, but patience erodes under suspicion. "You opened it," she said one night, sitting stiffly on the couch. "Why would you open it?" "I thought—" "That's the problem," she interrupted. "You thought." She left 2 weeks later. She took the plants, the books, the photos. She left behind a silence that pressed into Daniel's chest like weight. The police eventually cleared him. No charges, no apology. Clearance did not restore trust. Applications went unanswered, messages unread. Friends grew distant. Even family spoke more carefully around him, as if he were fragile or dangerous. Winter came. Daniel moved into a small studio above a laundromat. The walls vibrated with the sound of dryers. He took night work, security, cleaning, anything that didn't ask questions. He stopped explaining his story. Explanations sounded like excuses. 6 months later, a letter arrived. No return address. Inside, "You held that briefcase longer than most men would have. Long enough to imagine another life. Long enough to choose otherwise. The money was seized. The damage it was meant to hide is now being uncovered. I watched you from the platform. You waited. I am sorry for the cost. Some kindness leaves scars. Daniel folded the letter and put it in his wallet. He did not feel redeemed. He felt tired. He did not rebuild his life in any grand way. He did not become a hero. He volunteered once a week at a community center because they needed someone who could explain math without losing patience. A boy there once asked him why he always looked sad. Daniel thought for a long moment before answering. Because sometimes, he said, doing the right thing doesn't make things better. The boy nodded, as if that made sense. On his walk home that night, the rain had stopped. The pavement still glistened, reflecting streetlights like broken mirrors. Daniel walked slowly. He no longer expected life to reward him. He no longer believed goodness was noticed. But he had learned something quieter. That choices matter, even when they cost you everything you thought you were building. That integrity is not a shield, it is a weight, one you carry alone. Some people believe kindness always comes back around. Others learn the harder truth. If this story stayed with you, if you've ever made a choice no one thanked you for, you're not alone. There are more stories like this, and sometimes hearing them reminds us why we keep choosing anyway. He almost stayed seated. The train was crowded, wet coats pressed together, everyone tired. A woman stood near the door, holding a toddler, barely steady on her feet. She didn't ask. She just looked at the empty seat beside him. Daniel stood up. She whispered, "Thank you," and sat. That should have been the end of it, but across from him, a man in a sharp suit watched the exchange, didn't smile, didn't look away. When the lights went out in the tunnel, that man stood up, walked over, and quietly said, "You're a good man. Most wouldn't have done that." Then he placed a briefcase at Daniel's feet. "Hold this for me, just until the next stop." And before Daniel could say no, the man disappeared. Inside the briefcase was more money than Daniel had ever seen, and a photo of a little girl. That was the moment everything started to fall apart.